The rain had just stopped in Delhi. Soft drops still clung to the petals of marigolds laid across the long ceremonial walkway that led into the historic hall. A red carpet gleamed under golden lights. It was a night of celebration. The Prime Minister was expected any moment. Dignitaries whispered in sharp suits. Ministers, scientists, educators, and leaders from all walks of life stood in neat rows, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to be seen. But in the last row, sitting quietly on a wooden bench far from the spotlight, was a woman in a simple cream-colored sari. Her hair was tied back loosely, and her sandals were dusty from walking too far. Her name was Lakshmi Pichai. Few knew who she was. Most had never heard the name. She wasn't a CEO. She wasn't a famous speaker. And she definitely wasn't on the list of expected guests. Lakshmi had come alone. No escort, no badge. Only a folded letter she held tight in her hand. The ink was slightly smudged. It had come from a government office weeks ago. An invitation, an odd one. No reason given. No explanation why she, a retired schoolteacher from Chennai, should be invited to an event where India's highest honors would be celebrated. As security moved up and down the aisles, they glanced at her, unsure. One officer leaned over. "Ma'am, are you waiting for someone?" he asked kindly. Lakshmi smiled gently. "I'm just here to listen. I was invited." The officer hesitated, then nodded and moved on. Inside, the room filled with applause as the ceremony began. Names were called. Faces known across the world walked onto the stage. A young scientist received a medal for climate research. A former athlete was honored for her courage. Speeches were given. The Prime Minister listened with his hands folded, his expression calm but alert. Lakshmi sat quietly through it all. She clutched the folded letter tighter. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something deeper, something old, a memory, or maybe a hope. No cameras turned her way. No one offered her a drink. But she was not bitter. She had not come for fame. 40-5 years ago, Lakshmi had taught in a tiny school, tucked between rice fields and coconut trees. Her students often came barefoot. Some walked 5 kilometers each way. She used to bring extra notebooks, pencils, bought from her own salary. She believed in words. She believed in children, especially one boy who always stayed late, cleaning the board, asking about the stars. "Madam," the boy had said once, "do you think someone like me can ever go to America?" She had smiled at the question. "You can go anywhere, but don't forget your roots." He hadn't. She remembered the day he left. A plane ticket paid for with borrowed money. He had written letters for years. Then the letters stopped, but she still kept them. Yellowed envelopes with stamps from far away. Every once in a while, she saw his name in the news, but she never reached out. She didn't need to. Now, on this strange evening, she sat in silence and wondered if the boy had ever thought of her again. And then it happened. A murmur moved through the hall. The room went still. Prime Minister Narendra Modi stepped up to the podium. He looked over the audience, his voice steady and deep. "Tonight," he said, "we celebrate success. We honor progress. But we must never forget the roots of that success." He paused. "Before I continue," he added, "I must break protocol." The entire hall turned silent. Eyes widened, heads tilted. No one moved. "There is a woman sitting in the last row. She did not come with guards. She holds no title. She asked for nothing." Lakshmi looked up, confused. "But without her," Modi continued, "one of our brightest minds would not be where he is today." Gasps echoed around her. Modi lifted his hand and pointed. "Lakshmi Pichai," he said, "please stand." For a moment, she didn't move. Then slowly, she rose. Her eyes wide, heart pounding. A camera turned to her, then another. People whispered her name. "This woman," Modi said, "taught Sundar Pichai when he was just a boy. She fed his dreams. And though the world may celebrate what he has become, I choose tonight to honor what she gave. The audience stood. Slowly, at first, then all at once. Applause filled the hall. Not for wealth, not for power, but for kindness. Lakshmi's eyes welled with tears. She bowed her head. A chair was brought forward. She was guided gently from the back to the front, and as she walked, every person she passed stood and clapped. It wasn't noise. It was respect. As she reached the stage, Sundar Pichai himself stood waiting. He took her hands, eyes misty. "You remembered?" she whispered. "How could I forget?" he replied. And the cameras captured a moment, not of fame or glory, but of gratitude. But behind that moment, behind that tearful reunion, lay a story, far deeper, a story of sacrifice, a story of letters never sent, a story of a promise made long ago, and one last wish yet to be fulfilled. And that story begins now. The applause was still ringing in Lakshmi's ears, long after she had stepped off the stage. She sat beside Sundar Pichai now, her hands folded in her lap, her heart racing. But her thoughts were far away from the flash of cameras, from the whispers in the crowd, from the overwhelming wave of attention. She had not come here for this. As the rest of the ceremony continued, Sundar leaned over to her gently. "Are you all right, madam?" Lakshmi nodded with a soft smile. "I am, ... just surprised." He smiled back, but there was something in his eyes, a shadow, a hint of something unspoken. After the event ended, a private car was arranged. Sundar insisted on escorting her himself. Reporters gathered outside, but Modi's security team made sure she wasn't overwhelmed. Inside the car, silence hung between them, soft and respectful. "Do you still live in Chennai?" Sundar asked gently. "Yes," she replied. "In the same house. Nothing has changed." "You should have reached out to me," he said quietly. "After everything you did, I would have come. I would have visited." Lakshmi looked out the window. "You became a very big man. I didn't want to disturb your world." He looked down. "It was your world first." They drove past India Gate, glowing in the night, and reached a quiet guest house. She was led to a simple room. Before she entered, she turned to Sundar. "You've grown into a fine man," she said. "I'm proud of you." He smiled. "Can I visit you tomorrow morning, before my flight?" "Of course," she replied. But that night, Lakshmi could not sleep. She sat by the window, the folded letter still in her hands. Because what no one knew, not Sundar, not Modi, not even the men who sent the invitation, was that she had not come for an award. She had come for closure. The next morning, Sundar arrived just after sunrise. He brought tea. No cameras, no press, just him. He was quiet, respectful, warm. Lakshmi opened the door and greeted him like the little boy he once was. They sat together on the small veranda. Birds chirped nearby. The city was just waking up. "I want to know everything," Sundar said. "I remember some things, but not all." Lakshmi sipped her tea slowly, then began to speak. "You were always curious," she said. "More than the others, but not just about books. You wanted to know why the moon changed shape, why your father worked so hard, why your mother cried sometimes at night." Sundar looked down. "You once asked me," she continued, "why people left when things got hard." He nodded. "I remember that." "You didn't answer." "No," she said, "because I didn't know how to." A long pause followed, then asked the question that had been sitting in his chest for years. "Why did you leave the school?" Lakshmi's fingers trembled around her teacup. She placed it down carefully. "I was asked to resign," she said softly. "What?" Sundar's voice broke. "But why?" She looked up at him. "Because I refused to change a student's score." He froze. He was the son of a local politician, she explained. He had not passed. They told me to mark him anyway. I couldn't. Tears rose in Sundar's eyes. They punished you. Yes, she whispered, but I have no regrets. A silence fell between them, deep and respectful. Then Lakshmi reached into her small travel bag and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it slowly and handed it to him. A stack of old letters. His letters. I kept them all, she said. Every single one. From the first time you told me you had made it to Stanford, to the time you said you missed home. Sundar held them carefully, as though they were sacred. You never replied, he said quietly. I did, she said, but I never sent them. Why? She looked at him. Because I wanted you to fly. He blinked, confused. Some birds, she said softly, they only fly high when they stop looking back. Sundar wiped his eyes. Then Lakshmi said something unexpected. But now I must ask you for something. He looked up. Anything. I want to visit my old school, she said. One last time. Later that day, they flew to Chennai. The drive to the village was long. Fields had changed. New buildings had come. The school, however, still stood, weathered, tired, but upright. As Lakshmi stepped onto the old ground, children paused and looked at her with curious eyes. An old peon came rushing from inside. His hair had turned white, but he recognized her instantly. Madam. He gasped. Is it really you? She nodded, and the man cried openly, falling at her feet. Inside, nothing had changed. The same broken fan, the same chalk smell, the same rusted bell. She walked to her old classroom, stood at the same board, closed her eyes, and then turned to Sundar. Do you know why I asked to come here? He shook his head. She pointed to the back wall. A crack ran along it. Behind that wall, she said, I buried something. A promise. Sundar helped her break part of the wall. It was weak. Inside, in a small rusted tin, wrapped in plastic, was a notebook. A red notebook. She opened it slowly. Inside were pages filled with handwritten names, marks, and small stars next to some of them. This was my private record, she said. I always wrote notes about my students. Hopes, warnings, dreams. She flipped the page and showed him one name, Sundar Pichai. Underneath it was a note. He will change the world, but only if the world doesn't change him. Sundar broke down. You kept all this, just for me. Not just for you, she said softly. For what you represent. Then her voice broke. You are the proof that kindness can go far. He held her hands tightly. But as they sat in that old classroom, something outside was shifting. Someone had been watching them from a distance. Someone who did not want this visit to happen. Someone who remembered Lakshmi's defiance long ago, and they were ready to stir trouble. What began as a visit was about to become something far more dangerous. The sun dipped low behind the tamarind trees as Lakshmi and Sundar sat beneath the fading light outside the school building. The dusty courtyard smelled of chalk and history. The bell had long since rung, but neither of them wanted to leave. Something about the silence felt sacred. The past and present had met, and for a few hours, the world had felt whole, but not far away. Behind a half-crumbled wall, near the boundary of the school, a man watched through a pair of cracked glasses. His expression was bitter. His shirt, once white, had turned pale yellow with age, and his hands clenched an old photograph. His name was Ramon, 30-5 years ago. He had been the boy who failed Lakshmi's class, the boy whose father had tried to force her to change his score. When she refused, he was held back a year, humiliated, mocked, and his father, furious with shame, used his influence to get Lakshmi transferred out. What the world saw now was a kind old teacher being honored by the Prime Minister himself. But Ramon saw something else. He saw a woman who had cost him his future. He still lived in the village, forgotten and bitter. He had taken over his father's old accounts office, but the clients had vanished. The government contracts had stopped, all because of what Lakshmi had exposed long ago, and now she was back. Not just back but, with Sundar Pichai at her side. Reporters had already started circling. A few locals had even posted on social media. Ramon's hands trembled with anger. "No," he whispered. "She doesn't deserve this ending." Inside the school office, Lakshmi opened the red notebook again and handed it to the current principal. He was a young man, not even born when she had taught. "I want this to stay here," she said gently. "It's part of your history." The principal nodded, overwhelmed. "We'll keep it safe, madam, I promise." But as they stepped outside, again, a crowd had started to gather at the gate. Villagers, old students, curious faces, and someone with a camera phone. "Is that really Sundar Pichai?" someone whispered. "Yes," another said. "And that's his old teacher." A few people clapped. Others just watched, unsure how to act. No one had expected this. Lakshmi looked uncomfortable. She had never liked attention. "We should go," she said softly. But before they could reach the car, a sharp voice rang out from the side. "So the world honors a liar now." Everyone turned. Ramon stepped forward, eyes burning. Lakshmi froze. Sundar stepped protectively beside her. "Ramon," Lakshmi said, "I didn't know you were still, ... Still what?" he snapped. "Alive, poor, forgotten." The villagers looked at each other nervously. "You ruined my life," he shouted. "You cost my family everything. And now you come back like some saint." Lakshmi didn't speak. Her face remained calm. Sundar stepped forward. "Please, lower your voice." Ramon ignored him. "You think this man would be who he is without destroying others first? Your success was built on my shame." Sundar's jaw tightened. "That's not true." "What you're saying, don't talk to me like I'm stupid." Ramon spat. "You left us all behind. Now you return, cameras in hand, just to feel good about yourselves." A few villagers tried to calm him, but Ramon pulled something from his bag, a bundle of old files. "You want truth?" he said. "I still have the letter my father wrote, the one accusing her, the one that got her removed. It was never proven wrong." He held it up. "Read it. See what kind of woman you're honoring." Lakshmi reached out slowly. "I remember the letter," she said quietly. "It was full of anger and lies." "You think truth matters in politics?" Ramon growled. "Perception is power." For a moment, the silence was thick. Then Lakshmi stepped forward. Her voice was soft, but steady. "Ramon," she said, "you failed your test because you refused to study, not because of me. You blamed me because it was easier than blaming yourself." Ramon trembled. "I never hated you," she continued. "I prayed for you, even after I left." He stared at her, frozen. Then she pulled something from her own bag, a faded envelope. Carefully, she unfolded it. "This is a letter your mother wrote to me, 5 years after your father passed," she said. "She apologized. She said you had become angry, withdrawn. She asked me if I would ever come back to teach again." She handed the letter to him. He took it slowly. His hand shook as he read the words, his mother's handwriting staring back at him. His mouth moved, but no words came. Sundar stepped forward, his voice calm. "It's not too late, Ramon. Pain makes us believe the wrong people are our enemies, but you can still make peace." Ramon looked up, eyes wet. "How?" he whispered. "My life is nothing." Lakshmi took his hand. "No, life is nothing. Bitterness is the only thing that makes it feel empty." Ramon broke down, right there, in front of the villagers. He dropped the papers and cried. Lakshmi embraced him, gently. Forgiveness hung in the air, and the people around them didn't clap. They didn't cheer. They just stood, quietly, deeply moved. Because in that moment, they saw something greater than recognition. They saw healing. But in the background, as the crowd slowly dispersed, a black car sat parked near the edge of the field. A man inside lowered his sunglasses. He had been following Sundar's visit closely. He worked for someone high up, someone who wasn't pleased about the attention this school had received, someone worried about the old corruption coming to light again. And now that Lakshmi Pichai had returned, that someone had a problem they intended to fix, because the past wasn't just emotionally, was political, and not everyone wanted it uncovered. The rain returned that evening, not heavy, but steady enough to blur the edges of the sky. Lakshmi sat on the veranda of a guest home, arranged for her stay, a light shawl draped around her shoulders. Sundar had stepped out to take a call from Delhi. The silence between raindrops filled the space with memories. Lakshmi's hands gently held a photo, an old class picture, rows of smiling faces. She traced Sundar's younger self with a faint smile, then paused at the boy beside him. Ramon, double quotes. How easily time forgets pain, she whispered, but pain never forgets time. Just then, a knock came at the door. It was the school's current principal. His face looked pale under the flickering porch light. Madam, he said quietly, I need to speak with you, alone. She welcomed him in. He sat stiffly on the edge of the wooden chair, fingers clutching a paper folder. What is it? She asked gently. After your visit today, he began, something strange happened. A man came by the school, said he was from the Regional Education Board. Asked about the red notebook you gave us. Lakshmi narrowed her eyes. That notebook is private. It's not even official school property. I know, the principal replied. But he asked if it mentioned anything about ... bribery, government misuse, names of past inspectors. Lakshmi frowned. What did you tell him? I told him the truth, he said. That the notebook had nothing like that. Only student notes. She nodded, but something didn't feel right. The principal hesitated. Madame, he gave me this before leaving. He placed a note on the table. Lakshmi unfolded it. The words were printed in clean, cold ink. Stop digging into the past. Not all roots are meant to be unearthed. Her hands trembled. Before she could speak, Sundar returned from outside. He saw the note, picked it up, read it, and his expression changed. Who gave this to you? Sundar asked the principal. He didn't say, the man replied. But he had clearance papers. Official stamp. Sundar folded the paper carefully. This isn't a threat. It's a warning. Lakshmi met his eyes. But who would send it? He paused, then said, someone who still benefits from silence. Later. That night, Sundar made a private call to a trusted contact in the Prime Minister's office. A retired intelligence officer answered in a low voice. You're saying someone is trying to suppress an old teacher's diary? The officer asked. Yes, Sundar said. And they're using government channels to do it. There was a pause. Then the officer said, send me a copy of anything she has, and keep her safe. There are files that were never closed, especially from that region. Why? Sundar asked. What was covered up? The officer sighed. You're not going to like it. Early the next morning, a file arrived at Sundar's temporary residence through a trusted courier. Lakshmi sat beside him as he opened it. It was a report dated 37 years ago. Investigation into falsified school records. Thirukarai district lead witness. Lakshmi Pichai status. Dismissed due to political interference recommendation. Sealed and archived. Attached to it was a list of schools and names of officials who had embezzled government funds meant for village education. Lakshmi's school was listed. So was Ramon's father. I remember this, Lakshmi said, eyes wide. This was when the school roof collapsed in the rain. They said it was a natural disaster, but it was because they used cheap materials. The real funds never came. She looked at the names again. Her fingers stopped at one. This man, she said, he was the district education officer. He came to the school once, shouted at me for refusing to adjust the marks. Sundar pointed to a newer name stamped at the bottom of the file. He's still in the system, he said. Promoted. Now in charge of infrastructure for 3 states. A chill passed through the room. And if this story spreads, Sundar added, that notebook could reopen everything. That's why they sent the warning, Lakshmi whispered. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. We have to do something, Sundar said. Lakshmi reached across the table. We don't fight darkness with anger. We fight it with light. They called a press conference. Nothing dramatic. No accusations. Just a tributon announcement that Sundar would be funding the full renovation of the school where he studied. A new building. New classrooms. New scholarships in Lakshmi's name. But what caught people's attention was the phrase he used in his speech. Education must be rooted in truth, not in power. The phrase went viral. News channels began digging. Someone found a scanned photo of Lakshmi's red notebook online. It had leaked, and with it, names, initials, small handwritten notes that raised big questions. One line stood out. Funds not arrived. Headmaster worried. Local officer insisted papers be signed anyway. Those simple words pulled open a storm. By evening, 2 news anchors had begun asking questions on live television. By midnight, a petition began circulating to investigate old records from Thirukarai district. By morning, Lakshmi's name was everywhere, but not everyone was celebrating. At a high-rise office in Hyderabad, a senior official stared at the television. His aide stood nearby. Double quotes, sir. Do we let this pass? The man lit a cigarette. No, he said coldly. Shut it down before it spreads further. And the teacher. He exhaled, smoked slowly. She's an old woman. Make it look natural. The aide nodded and left. Meanwhile, back in Chennai, Sundar and Lakshmi were preparing for a public appearance at a children's science fair held in the local auditorium. Lakshmi smiled as she packed a few of her old lesson plans. I never imagined I'd see this day, she said. But Sundar's phone buzzed. A message from the intelligence contact. Warning, surveillance confirmed. Movement advised carefully. Car may be compromised. He stood still, eyes widening, then turned to Lakshmi. Change of plans, he said. She looked up, surprised. We're being followed. She didn't flinch. Then let them watch, she said. But I will not hide. Sundar clenched his jaw. No, he said. This time, we fight back smart. But time was running out. Because that evening, as they walked toward the auditorium steps, a car parked quietly across the street. Inside, someone opened a small black case, not with weapons, but something far worse. A forged file, one that could destroy everything Lakshmi had built. The auditorium was packed. Bright paper lanterns swayed overhead. Children stood in front of their science models, wide-eyed and hopeful. Parents clapped softly as judges made their way from one table to the next. The stage had been decorated with hand-painted banners that read, Celebrating Knowledge, Honoring Roots. Lakshmi stood at the side of the stage, wearing her favorite blue sari, the one she used to wear every Monday, back when she taught first-period science. Sundar stood beside her, adjusting the microphone setup for her speech. For a moment, they both smiled, as if the world was right again. But across the street, behind tinted windows, 2 men sat in silence. One man held a file with a new stamp, classified reopen pending charges. The papers inside were aged but doctored, carefully rearranged to look like Lakshmi had once taken money to pass students in exchange for favors. A complete fabrication, and yet it looked real enough to destroy everything. Release it during her speech, the driver said. Let the media eat it live. Won't someone cross-check? Truth doesn't matter in the first hour. Outrage spreads faster. Inside the hall, Lakshmi stepped up to the podium. Children gathered at the front rows. The air was warm, with respect. Her voice, when it came, was soft but filled with years of quiet power. When I first stepped into a classroom, she began, I was younger than some of the students. I had no money, No status, only a promise that I would treat every child as a future worth fighting for. Cameras flashed. Parents leaned in closer. We celebrate achievements today, she said, but let us never forget the struggle behind them. Every inventor, every engineer, every thinker was once a child, looking for someone who believed in them. As she paused to breathe, a notification popped up on dozens of phones across the audience. Leaked file suggests retired teacher. May have been involved in grade fraud scandal, more to come. Whispers started. Someone scrolled quickly, mouth hanging open. Someone else frowned. Lakshmi noticed the sudden change in the crowd. Sundar's face darkened. He pulled out his phone and saw the headline. He looked at her. Don't stop, she whispered. Not now. He nodded, stood behind her silently, as if to shield her with his presence. She continued speaking. Kindness is not weakness, humility is not silence, and truth is not afraid of time. But behind the podium, she could feel the heat of suspicion. Outside, the men in the car smirked. Done, the driver said. Let them drown. Minutes later, back at the guest home, Lakshmi sat quietly, while Sundar paced the room. They're pushing it hard, he said. Even major channels are repeating the headline. How bad is it? She asked calmly. He turned the screen to show her. A news anchor pointed at an old document now circulating everywhere. The words were clear. Teacher involved in falsified records investigation, buried in 1992. Lakshmi stared at it. That's a forged version, she said. They changed the handwriting. Sundar nodded. I know, but it won't matter. Not yet. People don't read, they react. He sat down beside her. We have to respond now, on our terms, not theirs. She looked at him. How? He opened his laptop. We live-streamed the truth. Within an hour, Sundar set up a direct feed. On his verified page, title, The Truth About Lakshmi Pichai. Live viewers, 4.3 million, and rising. Introduced her, not as a victim, but as a witness. Lakshmi sat straight, composed. I was a teacher, she began. I am still a teacher. What you've read today is not truth. It's fear wearing the mask of truth. She held up her red notebook. This is my memory. Every page is real. Every name, every struggle. And I will show you something they didn't expect. She flipped to a specific page, behind the notes. Taped carefully was a letter with the official school seal from 1988. This was from the board, she said, commending me for refusing to alter records after an audit proved my scores were accurate. The same audit that led to a new policy. The real file still exists. She held it up to the camera, showed the signature, the date, the stamp. Sundar spoke next. Whoever released that false file didn't know this existed. They gambled on silence. They lost. The comments exploded. Lied about her. I knew this was fake. She deserves justice. An hour later, a senior government official issued a public statement. We have reason to believe the leaked file was altered to mislead the public. A full investigation has been ordered. Back in the city, the men who planted the file received the news. She had the original. One asked. Yes, the other said, grinding his teeth. And now we have a bigger problem. What now? The man closed the folder. If we can't silence her, we discredit Sundar. The next morning, Sundar received a message from an old political contact. You've made enemies, real ones. Be careful. They're digging now, into you. Lakshmi placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to fight my battle, she said. This is not your battle, he replied. This is our battle, and we're not done yet. Because while the fake file had failed, the men behind it had not given up, and their next plan was already in motion. The air in Delhi felt heavier than usual. Back at Sundar's residence, Lakshmi sat on the balcony with a cup of plain tea, her eyes gazing far beyond the skyline. The early light of dawn touched the tops of buildings, bathing the city in soft gold. But inside, there was tension. Sundar had received another warning. They've launched an internal probe against Ewok, using conflict of interest, misuse of influence. Someone's pushing this hard, and they're pushing fast. Lakshmi had said nothing when he told her. She just looked at him with those calm eyes, the ones that had seen storms, and stayed steady. They are not attacking you, she finally said. They are attacking what you stand for. He sat beside her, tired. I just wanted to thank you. To honor what you gave me. I didn't expect a war. Lakshmi turned to him slowly. Truth doesn't fight to be liked. It fights to be heard. He smiled faintly. What do we do next? She held up the old red notebook. We do what we've always done. We teach. 2 days later, a live broadcast was announced, an open national interview, moderated by an independent journalist known for cutting through noise. The interviewer was sharp but fair. As the program began, the first question came quickly. Mr. Pichai, critics say you've used your position to create a narrative around your past, that you staged this entire teacher tribute to cover up political interests. How do you respond? Sundar didn't blink. My tribute wasn't staged, he said. It was overdue. I didn't lift her up. I simply pointed to her, and the world finally saw. He turned to Lakshmi, who sat beside him on stage, calm as ever. This woman taught me integrity before I even knew the word. The interviewer turned. Madam Pichai, you've been called many things in the last week. Brave, honest, and recently controversial. What do you say to those who doubt your story? Lakshmi folded her hands gently. I say, doubt is healthy. But fear dressed as doubt is dangerous. She leaned forward. If I had changed that student's score all those years ago, perhaps none of this would be happening. But if I had done that, the message would be clear. That honesty can bend. That rules are suggestions. And then, what would I be teaching? There was silence. Millions watched from homes, phones, and stations across the country. And then she added something that no one expected. I have terminal illness. The interviewer froze. So did Sundar. Lakshmi looked down briefly, then back. Up. I was diagnosed last year. I didn't come to Delhi for an award. I came because I wanted to see what had become of the seeds I planted. Tears rose in Sundar's eyes. I told no one, she continued. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to be remembered for living, not for leaving. The room was still, and now, she said softly, I want to use what time I have left to build something that doesn't end when I do. She held Sundar's hand. We are launching the Lakshmi Foundation. It will find and support forgotten teachers in rural India. The ones who gave quietly and were never seen. So nodded, fully funded. With full transparency, people began to clap, not in a burst but as a wave, a quiet, building wave of respect. The backlash dissolved within hours. Support poured in. Old students across the country shared their stories. Some hadn't seen their teachers in decades. Now they were reaching out, visiting, rebuilding. The red notebook was placed in the National Museum alongside a plaque that read, One teacher, one notebook, a nation awakened. Even the Prime Minister tweeted, Truth may be attacked, but it never retreats. I salute Lakshmi Pichai not just for what she taught, but for what she still teaches us. Weeks passed. The sun rose and set. One morning Sundar sat by Lakshmi's side again, this time in Chennai. Her health had begun to fade, slowly, but surely. You should rest, he said. She smiled. I will, but not yet. One last letter. She handed him a page. On it, handwritten with care, were her final words to be published when she was gone. He read it silently. Dear children of India, if you ever feel invisible, remember this. Roots do not bloom. They hold the tree in storms. Be a root, if you must. Be the reason someone else stands tall. With love, your teacher. Sundar folded the letter gently. I will make sure they read it, he said, voice trembling. She closed her eyes. I know. You will. Lakshmi Pichai passed away quietly the next morning, just before sunrise. No pain, no fear, only peace. But her name lived on. Schools across India held moments of silence. Children wrote essays about their favorite teachers, and the foundation built in her name helped hundreds of retired educators within its first year. What began as a forgotten bench at the back of a hall became a legacy, and the woman who once brought pencils to class in her own cloth bag lit a fire the nation would never forget. The school grounds in Tirukarai had changed. Fresh walls stood where the cracked ones had fallen. The classrooms had fans now, and solar panels lined the rooftops. Children ran between periods with polished shoes and shiny backpacks, their laughter echoing across a courtyard once silent with decay. But one thing hadn't changed. At the very back of the school compound, under a neem tree, stood a wooden bench. It wasn't polished. It wasn't replaced. Instead, it was protected, sealed, with a plaque that read, "She never asked for a throne. She chose a bench." In memory of Lakshmi, Pichai stood beside that bench now. The sky above was clear. His hair had grown a little grayer, but his voice was steady as he spoke to a small crowd of children seated in front of him. "I used to sit right here after class," he said softly, "and sometimes she would just listen." He paused, turning to a young girl in the front row. "Do you know how powerful it is when someone listens to you?" The girl nodded shyly. Sundar smiled. She knew. That's why she never interrupted, even when I rambled about science, or dreams, or fears. ... She listened. He looked up, toward the branches above. And because she listened, I grew. Across the country, the Lakshmi Pichai Foundation had become a quiet revolution. It didn't focus on exams. It focused on memory. A program called Roots Remembered encouraged students to write letters to their favorite teachers past or present and thank them. Some of those teachers were found in remote villages, some in retirement homes. Some had passed, but their families received those letters and wept as they read the words. New policies were introduced in the education ministry. A teacher dignity allowance was passed, ensuring minimum pensions for rural educators. One change at a time, because a nation that forgets its teachers forgets its own future. In Delhi, the National Museum opened a new wing. Inside, in a glass case, lay the original red notebook. Next to it was the cream-colored sari Lakshmi had worn on the night Prime Minister Modi had broken protocol. Next to that, a single chalk piece. A sign beside it read, "This was her weapon, and she used it well." Visitors walked slowly past it. Some whispered, some wiped their eyes, some stood longer than they planned to, and no one left untouched. Months later, Sundar visited Lakshmi's house in Chennai for the last time. He had bought it from her relatives not to live in but to preserve. He unlocked the door quietly. Everything was still there. The small kitchen, the bookshelf with faded titles, the rolled-up mats from when she hosted evening tutoring, a half-used jar of ground coffee. He stepped into her study. On the wall, above a wooden desk, was a frame she had placed in her final days. Inside it, a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Narendra Modi breaks protocol to honor a forgotten teacher." But she had underlined just one sentence with a red pen. In a room full of power, he pointed to humility. Below it, she had written a note. If he hadn't pointed, it wouldn't have mattered, because the child I taught saw me first. So touched the glass. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Some silences are louder than words. 10 years later, a girl named Daya stood nervously in a classroom in Madhya Pradesh. It was her first day as a teacher. Fresh out of college, eager, terrified. Her school had no air conditioning. The windows rattled. The chairs were old, but she smiled anyway, because in her hand was a book of handwritten lesson plans, copied from the Lakshmi Foundation archives, and taped inside the front cover was a tiny photo of Lakshmi, Pichai.diya, glanced at the photo, then at her class of 10 curious faces. "Good morning," she said. No reply. She smiled gently. "It's okay. I know you're nervous. I was too." She placed her chalk on the board and wrote one sentence: "Every mind matters." The students blinked. Then slowly, one hand went up. A boy with wide eyes. "Ma'am," he asked, "what if we're not smart?" Dia knelt beside him. "You don't have to be smart yet," she said. "You just have to be seen. And somewhere, on a bench in memory." Lakshmi smiled, because the story didn't end with her. It had just begun.